The wind was howling that night like it carried a secret it wasn't allowed to tell. In the dead of dusk, when the last orange light bled behind the ridge and the coyotes began their mournful chorus, a single scream shattered the silence in Dustwater Creek. A young girl named Clara May vanished without a trace. No footprints. No ransom note. No sound except that one cry that echoed off the canyon walls and froze the hearts of everyone who heard it. Dustwater Creek wasn't much more than a handful of wooden shacks, a leaning church steeple, a saloon that smelled of stale whiskey, and a sheriff's office where justice was more rumor than reality. Folks in that town lived on whispers and superstition. And after Clara disappeared, those whispers grew like weeds in dry soil, fast, tangled, and choking. Clara wasn't just any girl. She was the preacher's daughter. Sweet. Quiet. She had a way of calming the wildest horses with nothing but a soft hum. People said the Lord had placed a touch of grace on her. Others, less godly, said that kind of goodness doesn't last long out here. Sheriff Elias Crow was the first to ride out into the night. He was a tall, broad man with a stare like cold iron and a past nobody spoke about in daylight. He found Clara's bonnet half buried near the old railway line, fluttering like a lost bird in the wind. No signs of struggle. No tracks heading in or out. As if the desert itself had swallowed her whole. By morning, the town gathered outside the saloon. Faces pale. Eyes shifting. The preacher stood on the steps, clutching his Bible so hard his knuckles turned white. "Whoever took my child," he thundered, "the Lord sees you. And he will bring you to justice." But justice had a funny way of hiding in Dustwater Creek. The sheriff organized a search party. Men on horseback combed the canyons, lanterns swaying like fireflies against the dark. Women kept their doors bolted and prayed over their children. Nights turned colder. Days grew sharper. And the story began to twist. Some said Clara had been taken by outlaws who passed through days earlier. Others whispered about the railroad men, how they'd been buying up land, bullying farmers, making people disappear who stood in their way. And then there were the older folks, the ones who remembered stories from before the town was built. They spoke of the canyon. Of people who vanished near the tracks. Of how the earth sometimes took what it wanted. 2 days later, the sheriff found something else. A doll. Clara's doll. Its face cracked, its dress torn, lying beside a rusted railway spike half buried in the sand. But what caught his attention wasn't the doll. It was the spike. Someone had pried it loose. The rail line was broken, clean, deliberate. The preacher demanded vengeance. The townsfolk demanded answers. And the sheriff, he went quiet. He started questioning folks one by one. In the saloon, behind closed doors, with nothing but a lantern between their faces. First the railway foreman, a smooth-talking man with clean boots and dirty hands. "I don't know nothing about no girl," he said, eyes slick as oil. "We run trains, not kidnappings." Then he questioned Sam Holler, the trapper who lived by the canyon. A strange man. Eyes always darting. "I heard the scream," Sam muttered, fingers twitching. "Came from the canyon. Ain't nothing good comes out of there at night." But it was Clara's best friend, little Elsie, who gave him the first real clue. She whispered it like a sin. "I saw her talking to someone that day. Behind the church. A man with a black hat. Tall. Didn't look like nobody from town." The sheriff knew every man in Dustwater Creek. There was no black hat stranger. At least, none who should have been there. The nights dragged on. Lanterns burned late. Rumors grew teeth. People stopped trusting their neighbors. One by one, the sheriff peeled back layers of the town like old paint. And what he found underneath wasn't gold. It was rot. He learned that the preacher had been in debt to the railroad. Deep debt. Land, money, promises he couldn't keep. He learned that the foreman had been meeting with men in the canyon after dark. Deals whispered in the wind. And then he found a letter. Hidden in the preacher's desk. Crumpled. Half-burned. It was addressed to J. McGraw, a known outlaw who rode under no flag but his own. It read, "The girl will make him talk. Meet by the tracks at nightfall." The sheriff stared at that letter for a long time. The edges curled under his fingers. The words felt like poison. Then something happened that changed everything. On the fifth night, long after the search party had given up, a train whistle blew in the distance. But no train was scheduled. Dustwater Creek hadn't seen a night run in weeks. The sheriff mounted his horse and rode hard toward the canyon. Moonlight spilled across the broken rail like a silver blade. And standing there, near the missing spike, was a figure in a black hat. The sheriff drew his revolver slow, the metal glinting under the pale sky. "Turn around," he barked. The figure didn't move. "Turn around," he repeated. This time, the man obeyed. He turned slow. His face was lean, weathered, eyes like coals that had burned too long. J. McGraw. Outlaw. Killer. A ghost in wanted posters. But something was wrong. His hands were empty. His gun belt was loose. He didn't look ready for a fight. He looked cornered. "She's gone," McGraw said, voice low. "You're too late." "Where is she?" the sheriff growled. McGraw glanced toward the canyon. "She ain't in the canyon. She's under it." The sheriff lunged forward, slammed him against the rail. "You took her." McGraw spat blood and laughed. "You think I'd touch a preacher's girl?" "No, Sheriff. I came for him. She was the price to make him talk." But the railroad man, he had other plans. The words hit like a hammer. McGraw told him everything in that cold moonlight. The preacher had owed the railroad a fortune. When he couldn't pay, they arranged to borrow Clara as leverage to make him hand over his land rights. McGraw had been hired to snatch her, hold her near the tracks, scare the preacher into compliance. But when he arrived at the meeting spot, Clara was already gone. "The foreman's men took her," McGraw said. "They're hiding something under those tracks. Something worth killing for." The sheriff forced McGraw ahead at gunpoint. They followed the broken line deep into the canyon where the old railway tunnel lay, a place no train had passed through in years. Inside, torchlight flickered. Shadows danced on the rock walls. And the air smelled of damp earth and secrets. There they found it. A hidden chamber dug beneath the tracks. Inside were crates. Dozens of them. Gold bars. Railroad bonds. Stolen shipments that were supposed to have been lost in transport. The railroad foreman had been running a smuggling operation, using the preacher's land as cover. Clara had stumbled too close. Maybe she saw something she shouldn't have. Maybe she heard. Either way, she vanished before they could decide what to do with her. A scream echoed from deeper in the tunnel. The sheriff charged forward, lantern high, McGraw at his back. There she was. Clara. Bound but alive. Eyes wide with terror as one of the foreman's men raised a shovel, ready to silence her forever. The gunfight that followed was short, brutal, and lit by sparks. The sheriff moved like a storm. Bullets cracked against stone. McGraw fought beside him, not as a friend, but as a man who'd been double-crossed one too many times. When the smoke cleared, 3 men lay dead, the gold lay bare, and Clara sobbed in the sheriff's arms. The foreman tried to run. He didn't make it past the tunnel mouth. By sunrise, Dustwater Creek knew the truth. The preacher's debts. The railroad's greed. The outlaw's unexpected honesty. Clara's courage. It tore through the town like wildfire. Trust shattered. Deals exposed. A legend born in blood and silence. The preacher left town soon after, Bible in hand, shame in his eyes. McGraw disappeared back into the desert like a shadow at dawn. And Sheriff Elias Crow stood by the tracks, watching as the wind carried the last whispers away. Clara survived. But she was never the same. Some said she could still hear the train whistle at night, even when no train came. And Dustwater Creek, it carried that story like a scar. If you listen close on a quiet night, when the wind sweeps through the canyon just right, some folks swear they can still hear that scream. Others say it's just the land remembering what happened. Either way, stories like this don't die. They linger. Waiting. Whispered through the ages, like a secret carried on the wind. And if you ever want to hear more forgotten legends of the Old West, lean in close, and remember the name. Bit of West.